In this video I'm going to see how far I can take the humble Sculpey 3 Basic 10 pack, not only in how I can mix it and sculpt something, but how many times I can mix and sculpt something and how small. This video is brought to you by Cornelius. I think he looks like a Cornelius. I sculpted this guy in the last video where I used polymer clay. I was so happy with how he turned out, but also it was so satisfying using the polymer clay. I'm like, I missed that. I'm gonna do a whole video on polymer clay again, and that's what this is. So, this is a Classic Colors 10 pack of the Sculpey 3, and it's deceptive how much you can do with these. So I needed to use my clay as effectively as possible, and to do that, I needed to figure out what colors I want to use. I have a great mix of primaries and secondaries, but realistically, I don't need all of those colors for a simple sculpture that I'm going to repeat at half of the size every time. So I planned out a little bit of a sketch, and the concept that I'm really drawn to is the idea of creating an appealing looking character that's holding a version of himself half the size, holding a version of himself at half the size, holding a version of himself at half the size, and so on. You get the idea. So really I only needed like maybe 4 bigger chunks of colors and then a few smaller supplementary colors. The main ones being the skin tone, the pants, the shirt, and I also added a backpack when I realized that would also be a bit bland if I just had those 3 main colors. That, as well as the hair color, would be the main groupings of the colors. Now it was actually quite a challenge to figure out how to divide the clay into colors that would maintain a bit of a primary and saturated feel without getting too muddy by mixing too many colors, but also utilize the clay I have really effectively. Now I'm going to chop each of them in half. Yeah. There we go. So we got my skin tone, my hair tone. By the way, not all the colors end up looking appealing. I got my pants tone, my shirt tone, backpack, and then I have kept some of each of the, or most of the original colors, which I'm also just going to loosely chop in half because, I don't know, I might want to accent some things, and also it's just worth having something to fall back on. For example, red for the tongue, he's got the open mouth, and also, of course, making sure I have some black and white. So I'm halving all of those, and this batch of the original bigger halves, this is going to be what I'm going to sculpt for my first sculpture with. I'm going to see how far I can take all of these by halving them again and again and again and again. So I set about creating my first armature, and honestly guys, I can't overstate how important and helpful an armature is in most clay sculptures. Especially in something like this where there are thinner limbs, and I'm hoping that he'll be able to be somewhat weight bearing. Not only was I able to sort of test the pose and get the proportions right first, but by bulking it out with tin foil and wrapping the wire around some of the core limbs and areas of the sculpture for the clay to stick to, it creates a really strong foundation for the sculpture to rest on. Furthermore, because I could test the sculpture's proportions and pose, it meant that in trying to make it weight bearing, I could actually reposition the legs and arms in such a way that hopefully, and in theory, the center of gravity would remain at least close to the center or where his hands are, which is where I want to rest the next sculpture. As you can see, the steps from here are really straightforward and so satisfying. Gently adding bits of clay here and there to fill in where I need to, always reserving some aside and making sure I have enough to add some of those finer trims and details, folds to the clothes to make it look a bit more organic and not just like clay wrapped around an armature. And also trying to approach the different steps in a somewhat pre-calculated way. Make sure I get the core blocking in to a point where I'm really happy with it, and then can later add detail without disturbing too much of the proportions that I've already laid down. Bit of warning for those of you who want to get into sculpture, or I mean art in general, to be honest. One of the best things my art teacher ever told me is that every painting goes through an ugly phase. And as you can see with sculpting, the face, it's the same with sculpture. Every face goes through an ugly phase. And I obviously want to go for a really appealing, cartoony aesthetic, but to get there I have to get the proportions right and just put core lumps of clay in the right areas and slowly fill out the areas that need a bit more mass. And when I'm just doing this rough blocking, it looks weird. And then adding the hair looks like he's a balding dude, but once I put the top of the hair on, it's actually starting to come together. And then one detail at a time, it really, really comes together in a way that I'm super happy with. Last but not least, I move on to the hands, which I need to be fairly open and flat so I can sit the other versions of this character on him, but also, frankly, whatever else. Like, I think as a sculpture, it's going to be really cool to use him to hold stuff. I think it's a really fun sculpture idea. And then from there, with my sculpture done, one of my favorite steps is to add little blushies and little areas of detail to the sculpture with the chalk pastels. There are so many different colors, and if I wanted to go crazy, I could actually add shadows and darker areas and even highlights to the clothes and other areas of the character. I wanted to keep it simple. This is a sculpture challenge, and this has already taken me hours and hours of time just to do this first sculpture. So I'm just going really simple by adding a little bit of a light orangey pink blush to his nose, cheeks, and then other areas where the blood vessels are fairly close to the skin, like the fingertips, the elbows, the ears. Just by adding that subtle pink hue, it brings the character to life so much. And then after I bake it, which is my next step, it all solidifies and becomes a permanent colored sculpture. Here he is, fresh out of the oven. Oh my God, how cozy! I love him so much. Oh, this makes me happy. I haven't even done the challenge that you clicked on this video for yet, but for my first one, you know what? I love this so much. I love this. He's holding his hands out. I could use that to hold anything else. He could hold this head. He's a holder now. If I need somewhere to pop my watch while I'm recording, can he hold it for me? Oh, precarious at best, but he can do it. He's reliable. Oh, that's so good. I love this. And you know what I also love? That this is half of the clay from that 10 pack. It shows how far you can stretch it if A, you mix colors and make your own and pre-plan things out a bit, and B, if you use an armature. Not only is he more stable and rigid, like where he's bending and bouncing after baking, if I didn't have the armature in there, he'd be quite brittle and probably break. So armatures are amazing, and also so is the Super Sculpture box, but I'm just gonna take a minute to update you guys on that, by the way. As you've seen, I've used only tools from the Super Sculpture box, and I can do some really cool stuff I'm really proud of. And the Super Sculpture box does come with everything you need to jump into sculpture. However, by the time this video comes out, we're probably gonna be sold out of the individual Super Sculpture box. We are saving enough of the boxes to keep selling the Ultimate Creativity Collection of all 3 boxes, and a reminder that all of the contents of all of those 3 amazing boxes are worth double what you're paying for the Ultimate Creativity Collection. So if you're interested in getting into ink and calligraphy, or minis, mini painting, mini sculpting, and diorama building, those 2 individual boxes are available. And if you want to get those and the sculpture box is only available in the trio, in the Ultimate Creativity Collection. It also comes with Cos Clay, which is a bakeable polymer clay that's flexible, super cool stuff, and Monster Clay, my favorite, reusable, meltable, beautiful to work with sculpting clay. You get a whole pound of that, along with all the tools you need to do what I've done in this video and more, including custom tool cases. And anyone who gets the Ultimate Creativity Collection gets a hand-signed print. I'm sticking to that, so if you get one, well, if you get one now, you'll be one of the lucky ones, because they may not last until the end of the month. And like I said with Jazza's Jazzy art box, once this ends, it's ended forever. So with all that out of the way, it is time to partake in the How Small Can I Sculpt challenge. All right, people, it's challenge time, and you know how this works. With half the clay at each step, I'm seeing how detailed I can go, and you know what the steps are because I showed you with half of the clay. Now I'm going to show you with half of the clay. As you can see, this one was pretty breezy. It was a little trickier to keep the details in there, but overall it was all there, and I was able to be pretty accurate and still get a result I'm quite happy with. There's less room to smooth clay out and make really solid joins, but everything's there, and the most important thing is the appeal is there. I feel like I nailed the character's expression and style, so I can definitely say I'm a level 2 sculptor. Alright, level 3. Now I have to admit, at this point I was using less and less clay of each group simply because it wasn't really scaling, meaning that I was creating the sculpture to fit well on the previous model, which meant I actually had to sculpt a slightly smaller figure for each character to be able to hold up the next one and all of the future ones. So in future steps I'm going to skip some of the levels. But the first 3 are 1, 2, and 3, and I would say level 3 was pretty straightforward as well, getting pretty tricky, especially with my fingers being quite large and clunky. They got in the way a lot, and especially when I was getting to the details of the face, trying to put in some eye sockets in the nose and start refining the facial features, it was, yeah, really difficult, especially because defining the geometry of the face is something that is best done with the feel of your hands against the clay. You can sort of tell if it's symmetrical and you can smooth things out pretty naturally, but not at this scale and beyond. All that said, all the details were there at level 3. Alright, next I moved on to level 5, skipping level 4, so by that I mean I moved on to the 5th container. This is the halfway mark of our 10 level sculpture challenge. And I have to say, I did expect to be not using armatures from this step or even earlier, but I realized how important the stability would be, especially because each model is holding up models, holding models, holding models. But I was actually quite pleased to see that with each stage, I was able to cut down the mass of the armature. But this level 5 was the last armature I made. My hope being that the future levels would be light enough that they would be able to hold up the teeny weeny ones left. But honestly, I'm just pleasantly surprised I was even able to have an armature at level 5, and I think it really worked to the benefit of the overall project. Next, we skip ahead to level 7. No armature and sculpting in place. Now, just quickly pointing out that I did bake each of the models between each of the levels. That's why the previous ones are always sort of staying in position, because they were cured from oven baking. But this was really finicky, especially sculpting without an armature and at such a small scale. I mean, I have no way of even knowing if this clay is going to hold together. I could barely get in there to create shapes, let alone make sure everything is really well attached. And honestly, when you sculpt polymer clay and you're connecting different colors or removed segments, you do want to firmly attach and blend in the areas so that when they bake, they sort of bind together. So it's touch and go as to whether this is going to work, let alone future stages, but all in all, level 7, I did it. I wouldn't say I did it amazingly well, but I did it. Level 9 is where things start to fall apart a little bit. I couldn't sculpt it on the previous sculpture for obvious reasons, so I just sculpted on a little edge of some monster clay that I set up there. And I took my time with this one, trying to keep some sort of semblance of detail and a silhouette there, but man, it was getting really hard. Like, to the point where the clay was much more eager to stick to itself or something I didn't want it to stick to, like my finger, rather than the place I was trying to put it. So it started to get really frustrating, and I had to use a sharp razor to do any details or often any attachment points. And last but not least, level 10, which honestly I didn't expect to even be able to try and attempt. They just looked like crumbs in the little shot cup. But you know what? I'd built up my confidence and I was so eager to see this whole statue fully displayed with 10 levels of sculpting. Not all of the 10 steps for the reasons I mentioned previously, but I'm actually pretty chuffed. I managed to even sculpt a level 10 sculpted little character in this challenge to sit on top of the sculpture. Let's just cross our fingers he sticks together once I bake him. Oh, and by the way, it's worth mentioning, with just the couple of steps that I skipped, I think I only skipped 3 steps, and with the leftover clay from a couple of the earlier stages, I was actually able to put all that stuff together and have a fairly substantial amount of spare clay. So, you know, keep that in mind. Like, the amount of sculpting I actually got to do with this project was pretty substantial, and to have about a third or a quarter of the clay left over to make another fairly substantial sculpture with is really cool. So don't underestimate how much you can do with fairly simple looking sets of clay like this. You can mix and match and expand and support and make them big and epic. The time has come to put it all together. Oh my god. Let's do this thing. A little bit of blue tack on his tushy and on to level 2. Oh, look at that, like a glove. All right, on to level 3. Please don't break, please don't break. Oh, we're snug, we're snug. Look at this is so good. So we skipped a level, on to level 5. Even just sitting him down there, that just sat perfectly in place, but I don't want this thing to collapse. There we go. There we go. This is so dumb and amazing. This one is level 7, and the first one without any armature inside the model, but he's held together. There's no armature, and look at his arms. Oh no, super glue. So I'm just gonna put the teensiest bit of super glue inside here. Please, come on, we can do this, guys, come on. We've come so far! I'm not even gonna blue tack this last one. I'm just gonna super glue it. Put your little tushy there. There you go. This is it, people. That was level 9. There's only one level left. This guy. This is just way too cool. I love how this turned out, and I love more than how I feel about my sculpting through the challenge, how I nailed the concept. Oh my god, I'm just so happy that like I had this idea for what I wanted to do to show the stages of the sculpting challenge, and the fact that it all goes together so beautifully makes me happy. I hope this video made you happy, because I have found the process thoroughly enjoyable, and I hope you found this thoroughly entertaining. If you did, please hit like, and if you're interested in the sculpting stuff, you can still get it as part of the Ultimate Creativity Collection. You can also get the other boxes individually, but maybe not for long, and all of the boxes or the collection will end by the end of January. So if you're interested, don't miss out. Links in the description. Thank you for watching this video. There are more over there you're bound to enjoy, especially if you enjoy sculpting and cute little characters like this. I've had a blast. I hope you've had a blast too. And until next time, I'll see you later.